postpone it. Okay, we will push it back. We'll put it in the back burner for some time, and the key algorithms and interesting and advanced algorithm we'll look at it but before the first weekend of December. Okay, now let us get started with gradient descent algorithm. One second, let's just took longer time for me to understand the concept, the gradient descent algorithm, because almost 3 to 4 years back, not many blogs were available regarding gradient descent, right? So no, blogs were available, but the articles related to gradient descent was not available. Oddly, one or two articles were there, and even right when we started exploring it, we were able to reduce the cost, minimize the cost, but still we didn't know how to make sure that this algorithm has converged. Right, there are some issues here and there, but later point in time, we are with the by executing the gradient descent algorithm, gradually we understood this algorithm is not so difficult, very simple one. Okay, but those days when one or two articles were available, when I went through that, it was completely confusing. They were using too much of jargons. Okay, derivatives, partial derivatives. It was literally confusing, not able to understand. I thought it is literally difficult. The gradient descent algorithm is very difficult to understand because a lot of the formulas like power rule and chain rule, sum rule, like the multiplication rule, scalar rule, many things were there. I thought it is very difficult, and again implementing them is not that easier. But after we started implementing them, practically we found it is nothing, very simple algorithm only. Even now, plenty of videos are there in YouTube, and plenty of articles are there in the internet. But there are some blogs are really helpful, and they made it very simple. Okay. Now I'll try to simplify this concept, as much as possible. Okay, I'll try to reduce the complexity, as much as possible. Now let us try to understand what is gradient descent. Gradient descent is an iterative optimization algorithm. So it is an optimization algorithm. Using gradient descent, we can optimize. Iteratively, we can, iteratively will be able to, optimize the algorithm. Which algorithm? We can use it for linear regression, even for logistic regression, even for neural network. We can use it. In neural network, we have something called back propagation algorithm. In the case of back propagation algorithm, the gradient descent is the one. This is the algorithm is used as part of back propagation to minimize the cost. Okay, it is used to find the values of parameters of a function that minimize the cost function. The whole objective of the gradient descent is minimize the cost. Okay, don't worry about cost loss now. Now let us understand what is cost. We know what is error. Error is mean squared error, right? Mean squared error. We used mean squared error and root mean squared error to evaluate the linear regression model performance. The model which has lesser root mean squared error, that model is the best model. That is how we judge how well my model is performing. The lesser the error, the better the model. Lesser the error, better the accuracy. Everybody will expect the higher accuracy, isn't it? Supposing you go for, you want to buy a house, right? If somebody tells, if you invest money on this house in so-and-so area, after 5 years, this is the expected return you can get it. If I invest money on the stock market, if somebody can accurately predict, let's say, oddly I have $1,000 in my balance. Okay, somehow I need to multiply this money at least for the next 3 to 4 months, because let's say my friend's marriage is there. He requested me to loan him. I have to help him. Or let's say my brother's marriage is there, right? I need money desperately. So what I do is, before oddly I have $1,000 in my hand, and I need to multiply that. After 6 months, yes, definitely that is helpful, at least to help him some amount, okay, by giving some amount. In that case, I need to be very cautious before I invest the money on the stock market because of volatility in the stock market. Okay, so in that case, if I use an algorithm that helps me to find out the optimal or the near accurate estimate, right? This is the estimated or forecasted price. That would be really helpful. Let's say now I invest $1,000 and I buy 100 shares. As per my model, if I invest $1,000, I can get approximately $2,000 every month. Let's say let's say $1,000 I can get it as a return. My investment is $1,000. The return is 1,000 for every month. That is what as per the estimation, my algorithm tells. But in reality, if that happens, we'll be very happy, right? Let's say I'm asking Rishik, hey Rishik, I have $1,000. If I invest it now, how much return I can expect every month? If he tells me $1,000 every month I can expect. So what happens, right? At the end of every month, if I get exactly $1,000 or somewhat closer to $1,000, I'll be very happy because the way he estimated, it is closer to the whatever he promised, right? It is good. The whole idea is the error is supposed to be less. You take any machine learning algorithm, lesser the error, better the accuracy. We use error metric to measure the model performance in simple term. Here instead of saying error, we use a fancy term called cost. Some people they use loss and some they say cost. Okay, but going forward, we are going to use this term only cost because you are already familiar with error, and we are going to use cost in place of error. Cost is nothing but the error. Okay, we know very well the actual value minus the predicted value. Let's at the end of the month, right? Or let's say at the end of November month, I invested money on the share market, $1,000 I invested, and what he says is our friend Rishik, he can get $1,000 as a return, 1,000, and minus predicted. The 1,000 is the predicted. The actual one is after 1 month when I see the return. Let's say if I get $980, so 980 minus 1,000, and if I square it, 12, right? So 224. Okay, it is fine. It is somewhat closer to whatever he estimated. Lesser the error, it is better. So then the Rishik will take credit. My estimation is very good because whatever I predicted, somewhat closer to that only he got the return. But what I will do is henceforth I will go by his word for future investment. Okay, this is a simple example. The whole idea here is the cost supposed to be less. Lesser the cost, better the estimation accuracy or the predicted accuracy. So the whole idea of the objective of machine learning algorithm is minimize the error. The error is supposed to be less. The lesser the error, better the accuracy. That is one of the key objectives of the machine learning algorithm. The prediction or estimated outcome should have very less error. The accuracy should be very high. Fine. So now you understood. Now you learned about what is cost. Cost is nothing but the error. The mean squared error. You just think, right? Mean squared error. Okay. Don't ask me. Can't I call why root mean squared error is not used? But in the case of gradient descent, we will be using this one only. Okay. The mean squared error only. You just think about it. Okay. The cost is nothing but the error. The objective of the machine learning algorithm is to minimize the cost. There are three different types of gradient descent algorithm. One is batch gradient and stochastic gradient and mini batch gradient. We start with understanding what is batch gradient descent. So for a linear regression, we use the equation. We know the equation for linear regression. What is the equation for the linear regression? Y is equal to beta naught plus beta 1x. Let's take a simple example, the simple linear regression. For the simple linear regression, the equation is y is equal to beta naught plus beta 1x. But again, as I told you, so we use some fancy term when it comes to gradient descent. Instead of saying y is equal to beta naught, see if you look at the books, right, y equal to mx plus b, they use the algebraic notation like this. This is what your linear regression, simple linear regression equation. This is your simple linear regression equation. Why? So the b is the intercept, and the m is the slope. So we know what is intercept, what is slope. Fine. But in the case of gradient descent, we use different notation. That's all. The y is the h theta of x. Instead of y, h theta of x we use it. This is nothing but the hypothesis function for the linear regression. Hypothesis function of your linear regression model. Instead of y, we say h theta of x, and instead of b, we say theta naught. This is my intercept, this is my slope. That's it. Because why I am introducing this new term is, new notation is, if you go through any article in the net, they'll be using this. And even if you look at the code, most of the gradient descent algorithm related code, right, they would have used, the term like theta, theta 1, theta naught, theta 1. So, hence, you should be familiar with this. Okay. So now you are clear with the jargons. You know what is cost. Cost is nothing but error, and h theta of x is nothing but y, and this is nothing but my intercept. This is my slope. Okay, h theta of x equal to theta naught plus theta 1x. Don't get confused. Okay, it's a very simple one if you remember it. So what is the goal of gradient descent? Minimize the cost function j of theta. So I call the cost as, I use the notation j of theta. J of theta is nothing but my cost. Okay, and this is my cost. And if you look at this diagram on the right side, this is my weight. Weight is nothing but, you say theta naught, the intercept, or it could be your slope also. Sometimes they use the term weight. Weight is nothing but theta naught, either theta naught or it could be theta 1. Okay, so here in the y-axis they plotted the weight. Instead of theta they use w here. Okay, you just, instead of saying that, I can say j of theta instead of saying w, right, to avoid confusion. I use the meaningful notation. Okay, j of theta naught. This is my cost, j of theta. I plotted the cost here, and in the x-axis I plotted the coefficient or parameter value. Okay, so what I have to do now is, what I should do now is, the objective here is, we need to find out the optimal value for both the theta naught and theta 1 in such a way I can minimize the error. So we know very well y is equal to, I'll use the traditional the notation which I use it. Okay, beta naught plus beta. So the beta naught and beta 1 intercept and slope is computed by my model algorithm, my statistical software. I don't have to compute this manually. Let's say hypothetically my intercept is 1.5 and my beta 1 is 2. My model already computed. Okay, let's say the x is the size of the house, 500 square feet. Okay, if somebody is asking you what is the estimated housing price for the 500 square feet of the house, so 2 into 500,000, 1,001.5, 1001.5. This is the estimated cost of the house. This is how we will estimate. So this 1.5 and 2, my model, my statistical software already computed, it gave it to me, right? The value for the beta naught and beta 1 supposed to be very optimal. The value which we use it. So basically, as part of gradient descent, we are trying to find out the optimal value for the beta naught and beta 1. What do you mean by optimal value? The value for the beta naught and beta 1 which should help to reduce the cost. Okay, it will find out using this algorithm, we can find out the optimal value for beta naught and beta 1 in such a way to minimize the cost. The first question is, what is gradient descent? Using gradient descent, we wanted to minimize the or optimize the cost. Instead of saying minimize blindly, optimize the cost. Right? So that is the whole objective of gradient descent algorithm. So why am I talking about gradient descent? The objective of this one is to minimize the cost. What do you mean by how do I minimize the cost? By finding out the value for, we to find out the value for both the beta naught beta 1 in such a way that can reduce my cost. Right? Find the value which can reduce the cost of my the estimated value of my housing price or something like that. Right? We need to find out that value instead of say 1.5 or 2 in this case. If I use 1.5 and 2, hypothetically, let's say the error is let's say 2 or 20. Let's say if my model finds out some other better value than this beta naught and beta 1, which reduces my cost instead of 20, right? Let's say if that reduces my cost to 5, the error, okay? That means the accuracy is far better. Lesser the error, better the accuracy. Lesser the error, better the accuracy. The same thing you can use it in the school example also, right? Somebody, let's say, no, Rishik, you are predicting I'm going to get 98% in GRE. This is what you are predicting it. After the result, when you compare your mark, right, you are getting it 97. So this is your predicted one, this is your actual one. This is your actual one. This is your actual one. So when you look at the difference between these two, the difference is just very minimal. Supposing somebody is predicted 98%, but they got 68%. That means something wrong with the prediction algorithm, because here the prediction is wrong, right? Something went wrong here. It is not correct. Maybe if you subtract this one here and there, right? This is the actual and this is the predicted. So the error is very high. The higher the error, your model accuracy is not that good, right? So this is your actual mark, but this is what you predicted. The difference between these two are 30. That means the cost is very high, which means your prediction, the algorithm which you used was not, the prediction accuracy is not good. The error is too high. So I need to reduce the error. How can I reduce it? That is where we are using the gradient descent algorithm. That is the whole objective of this one. So the J of theta, one second, let me just. So now you understood what is cost, what is the objective of the gradient descent algorithm. Now let us define the cost function. The J of theta is nothing but my cost. That is what I already mentioned, and is equivalent to, this is nothing but mean squared error. In the previous slide, we discussed about mean squared error, isn't it? This is what my cost function, right? See, instead of writing like this, what is cost? I use the notation J of theta is equivalent to 1 by n into this one, h theta of x. Okay, here what I do is h theta of x minus the yi whole square. For each and every observation, the error, the computed error. So here I mentioned about the actual value. This is my actual. This is what my predicted. It will be a bit confusing, but don't worry. Look here. Look at this equation. This is nothing but y is equal to beta naught beta plus beta 1x. Our typical, this is the typical notation used to represent the linear regression equation. But when it comes to gradient descent, this is the notation we use it. Okay, now you tell me whether, see, instead of y we have h theta of x. On the right side of the equation, if I plug in the values, let's say my model computed the value for theta naught and theta 1, estimated the value for theta naught and theta 1, and we know this, if I plug in the size of those here, we'll get some value. If I get something like $1,001, this is the estimated price, right? It's nothing but the predicted value. The right side of this equation is not, the value of the right side of the equation is nothing but the predicted value, right? So instead of using it here, we are just plugging in here h theta of x. H theta of x is nothing but the predicted value, right? This is the one is holding the predicted value. So this is nothing but predicted. So predicted minus actual whole square. So this is my mean, which is nothing but my mean squared error only. Okay. So J of theta is nothing but See, we are we are simply using different notations, different jargons for the same thing, right? It's something like, the same wine in the new bottle, right? Same thing. Okay, the same philosophy here. Right? So predicted minus j of theta is nothing but the error. Instead of saying error, we say cost function. We use the notation j of theta. Fine. Up to this, you are fine. See, the goal is minimize the j of theta. If I say minimize j of theta, which is nothing but the cost, 1 by m into I equal to 1 for each and every observer. See here the number of training examples. M is nothing but for each and every training examples, records, and xi is nothing but the input vector for the ith training example, right? For independent variables, right? Independent variable 1, 2, 3, multiple independent variables we use it, that is the one it says, okay? The y is nothing but the class label for the ith training example. For each and every observation, we have the housing price, right? So this is nothing but kind of your size of the house, age of the house. This is nothing but the actual value. This is the predicted value, this is the actual value. Okay, instead of x is nothing but the predicted value, this is actual value, and theta is nothing but the chosen parameter values. This is nothing but the beta naught, beta 1, beta 2, the intercept and slope coefficients. And this is nothing but the algorithm's prediction for the ith training example using the parameters t. That's all. Okay. Okay, enough jargons, enough notations. Okay. Now, to understand this algorithm, right? So how to find out the optimal cost? I will directly jump into one simple analogy. With this analogy, you will be able to understand how this algorithm works. Okay, fine. Supposing, let's take for example, supposing you are standing on a hill. You are standing on a hill. Okay, you are standing on a hill. Okay, I'll tell you before that. Okay, before that analogy, I'll tell you one more thing. Okay, so we are talking about linear regression, right? How to minimize the cost for the linear regression using gradient descent algorithm. Now we are going to discuss that only. We are discussing that one only. In the case of linear regression, right, we call this one as the convex function. Linear regression is nothing but a convex function. Convex function, the shape of the convex function will be something like the U-shaped one. Okay, just keep only this one in your mind at this moment. Okay, don't think anything beyond this. Okay, we have something called non-convex. Non-convex is non-linear. Non-linearity. In that case of classification algorithm, right, it is non-linearity. We will be using non-convex that time. The convex function is used for the regression problem. Okay, fine. So that's why the U shape is there here. Let us assume that you are standing on top of a hill. Let's say you are standing here. You are standing here. There is a pot here, treasury pot. Okay, this treasury pot is filled with a lot of gold coins and jewelries, diamond jewelries. And somebody is challenging you, right? Right. Even TV, there are some programs, right? So something like if you win that challenge, they'll give you they throw some challenge. If you win that, then you deserve to have the everything, right? So something similar to this here. You are standing on top of a hill somewhere here, and right, they kept the treasury pot here. Someone kept the treasury pot here. But if you reach this place correctly, then you deserve this. You deserve to take this entire pot, the treasury pot. Okay, you are standing here, and but the challenge here is your eyes are blindfolded. You cannot see. How can you reach this place? How can you reach this place? Your eyes are blindfolded. Okay, how you can reach out to this place? So you can descend from the hill, right? You can walk down. If you if you keep descend, if you walk down, right, walk down further, you can reach the downhill. But now the problem is your eyes are completely blindfolded. You cannot see anything. How you can come in? So how you can come down? What are the things that are required to come down to reach this place? You need to know the direction, right? You need to know the direction. Which direction? You can go this, so you might tend to go this direction also. Since because your eyes got closed, right? You might tend to go up also, or you might tend to go in other direction also. These are all hills, okay? It's a hill. You can get, you can go here also, this direction also, right? You can go this direction also. You can go this direction also, and you can go this direction also. If you go this direction, you may not reach this place. So all you need is two things. One is the direction. Essentially, you need to know two things. You need to know which direction should I go. If someone can tell you, hey, let's say you have a mobile phone. If somebody tells, right, hey, don't go that side, turn on your left, slightly turn on your left, and then walk down. And if somebody calls you, let's say they gave you mobile phone, right? So with the help of the mobile phone, with the guidance of somebody, you will get to know the direction. So one thing what you need to know is direction. What is the other thing that you need to know? If you know the direction, is that sufficient? Is that sufficient? You need to know the step size. Am I correct? If your step size is very longer, what will happen? Let's say you keep jumping, right? Or your step size is very big. See, they buried this treasury pot on the earth, okay? If you keep jump here and your step size is very longer, what will happen? You will overshoot. You will not reach this place at all. Am I correct? If you know the direction and if you know the size of your step, each step, right, then you can reach this place. There is every possibility that you can reach this place. If you look at this very closely, as you keep descend, your step size is also reduced. Your step size is also reduced. Right? So that's what the equation says here, right? See, you don't even have a mobile phone and you don't have the compass and your eyes are completely blindfolded. If somebody is asking you to walk down, how can you do that? Right? So that is where this equation is helpful. Right? In this equation, this one, right, this is nothing but the derivative term, partial derivative. This is the one is helpful in terms of finding out the slope. Slope is nothing but the direction, right? Which direction? Can I go this direction? See, for this position, the slope is this one. Let's say you are taking one step, right? You are taking one step and you are walking downwards, right? Walking towards this one. You've taken one step, right? And currently now you are here. When you are here, the slope will be something like, right? The slope will be something like this. For each and everything, right? The slope will also get changed. So why, right? So you need to know the slope, which is nothing but the right. So the direction, right? The direction. This equation helps you to give the direction. And how do I know the optimal step size? Here the step size suppose 1.5 feet, and if I keep 1 feet, and as I walk closer to this one, my step size should be just half feet, quarter feet, less than quarter feet. Okay, it should be like this. So this step size will get reduced as you move towards the treasury part. The treasury part is nothing but the optimal cost. This is what we want to achieve, right? Optimal cost. Find or the optimal value for your theta naught and theta 1, right? So the beta naught and beta 1, you need to find out the optimal values in such a way which can reduce your cost. Fine. So how do see now I know using this derivative I will get to know the direction. So how do I know the step size? You see, this is a big hill, okay, almost 2 kilometers. You are standing 2 kilometers above the hill, okay, from the earth, right, from the downhill, 2 kilometers on top of the 2 kilometers above the hill you are standing, and you need to reach out to this place, okay. So in that case, if you know the direction, you will get down, but in addition to the direction, you need to know the step size. But initially you can take a bigger step, right, bigger step, and as you walk closer to this, your step size should be very less. So the direction, with this one partial derivative, we can find out the gradient, right? Gradient is nothing but the slope or direction, okay. And the step size, how do I find out the step? That is where you have something called alpha. Alpha is nothing but the learning rate. Alpha is a parameter. It is also called as a learning rate or step size, and smart choice of alpha is crucial. You need to use the you need to use the optimal value or smart value for the alpha. Okay, but initially we cannot say, right, optimal value. How will you get? How will you know? Start with some 0.01, some value. Okay, or 0.01, alpha value 0.01. So the step size into gradient, alright, if you multiply these two, you will get to know which direction, what is the step size that I should use it. And in addition to that, with the help of this, you got to know the direction, and using alpha you get to know the step size also. Let's say you have taken one step. Currently you are standing here. To take the next step, again you need to know the direction and also the step size, right? So here what we do is we subtract the product of both the learning rate as well as the step size and the gradient. And if you subtract this from the current position, you will get, right, you will get the next position, right? So next direction, what is next direction, what is the next size, that you will get to know, right? That you will get to know when you subtract the product of the step size and the partial derivative. And then if you subtract this from this current position, you will get to know the next position. Okay, that is how we will find out the next one. This is my next position, the current position, and this is my next position. Okay, so for each and every step you need to update the value for the theta. In our case, right, we have theta naught and theta 1. Theta naught is intercept, theta 1 is for slope, right? Similarly for theta 1 also we need to find out. Okay, for each and every step, see here the j is nothing but theta 0 and let's theta 1, right? So for each and every step you need to update the values for the theta naught and theta 1. Like in the case of k-means, we have update, right, assignment step and update step. It is not same as that one, but each and every iteration, right, you need to update the parameters here to get to know the next position. The simple thing is you need to know the direction, you need to know the step size. If you know both, then you will get to know how to reach the treasury part correctly. Okay, so this equation helps us to to achieve the minimal cost, right, to help us to get the minimal cost. The treasury part is nothing but the optimal cost, right, for us, optimal value for the theta naught and theta 1. As I told you, find out the value for theta naught and theta 1 in such a way find out the best value. Instead of saying value, right, find out the best value for theta naught and theta 1 in such a way which helps us to minimize the cost. So how do I do that? So the simple thing is the same analogy, whatever I told, right? So you need to use the direction, you need to use the step size, using which you can find out the best way to reach out to this place, the optimal cost. Okay, fine. The next one is, these are the steps we need to do it. In this case, right, step size is nothing but the slope into the learning rate. This is my alpha, and you saw, right, dou by the dou theta naught into j of theta naught comma theta 1. Listen very carefully, okay, and don't get distracted. Okay, this is my partial derivative, right? By taking the partial derivative on these two things, you will get the slope, which is nothing but the gradient, and multiplying these two things, you will get the step size. Okay, and see, first step, what we do is we take the derivative of the loss function for each parameter. For theta naught also we take the derivative, and theta 1 also we need to take the partial derivative. See what I have shown here, right, what you have shown here, I just showed only one parameter here because we are using two parameters, right, theta naught, theta 1. Look here, theta naught and theta 1. To get the optimal value, right, what you need to take, you need to take the partial derivative for both this one, okay, for loss function for each parameter. Initialize the random values for the parameters. See, the simple way of doing is y is equal to beta naught plus beta 1x. Okay, and plus e, right? This is the one I discussed at the very first session. You just keep the e here, and if you move the rest on the left side, what will win? This is my actual value minus beta naught plus beta 1 x. What is beta naught plus beta 1? Within nothing but my predicted value, right? This is my actual minus predicted. This is my error. Right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with some, I'll initialize with some 0, 0. Initially you start with very small value instead of 0, right? 0.001, 0.001. If I use 0.001 for both beta naught and beta 1, what is the error? And the first iteration, second iteration, what I do, I slowly increment 0.002. If I use this value with the different values for beta naught and beta 1, what is the error? At one point in time, right, when you use certain values for beta naught beta 1, you may tend to find the error is very less. Let's say when I use 0.001 for the parameters beta and beta 1, my error is 500. Okay, let's say I'm using 0.002. I am getting 520, something like, okay, and at one point in time, right, 0.0001, let's say hypothetically your error is just 5, it is very less, then we will use this value for beta naught and beta 1. So initially initialize random values for the parameter. That is what it says, right? So this one we will discuss it. Ideally this one supposed to be next step. The first step, right? We initialize the random values for the parameters beta naught beta 1 and plug the parameters values into the derivatives and calculate the step size and update the parameters with new values, because we need to know the next step, right? Next step, how should I take, which direction, and what is the size of my step, you need to know. For that you need to use this step, or in simple term, right, you need to, anyhow I'll show you the derivative, so that with the help of the, or in simple term, right, the simplified version is this one: initialize with some random values for the parameters theta 1 and theta 1. By keep changing theta 1 and theta 1, try to find out at which or for which value of theta 1 and theta 1 my cost is reducing it. It is as simple as that. So gradient descent is a convex function. When it comes to linear regression, it is a convex U-shaped thing. Okay, that's all. Now let us jump into the mathematical part. Right, so we need to take the partial derivative on the cost function. Why should I? So here in this step I mentioned about take the derivative of the loss function for each parameter. Why should I take the derivative instead of saying derivative, right? A partial derivative. We need to take the partial derivative of the loss function for each parameter. Why should I take the partial derivative? Because of taking the partial derivative only, you will get to know the direction, the slope, or the gradient. Gradient is nothing but slope. These are the advanced term, okay, the fancy term. The gradient is nothing but the slope. Which direction should I go, right? By only when you take the partial derivative of the cost function, it will give you the direction, right? And what you do is once you get to know the gradient of the loss function, with that you will get to know the gradient. And if you multiply the gradient by the step size, right? Sorry, this is your gradient. Gradient nothing but slope. If you multiply this alpha value, you will get the step size. For each and every step, you need to update the values for both theta naught and theta 1, right? So, it's nothing but for each and every updation of theta naught and theta 1, what is the cost? For which theta naught and theta 1 value, the cost is very less. That is what we are trying to find out. So what I will do is we will see how we can in order to understand the partial derivative, right, you need to understand the basics of certain rules, the gradient descent algorithm. In order to understand that, you need to understand certain basic things like the partial derivative, what is the sum rule, product rule, everything. Okay, for that Yeah, but we have something called chain rule. Chain rule is the important thing which you need to be aware of that one. Yeah, chain rule. So chain rule and power rule and sum rule, you should be knowing it. Okay, so I'll explain you what is chain rule and power rule. And first of all, to understand how to derive this equation, right? How did we derive this equation? You need to know this one. Okay, what I will do is I will start with one simple example. Okay, what we will do is first to understand the derivative, right? Let's see, I have a function called f of x. F of x equal to x squared. Okay, x squared or something like that. And if I take the partial derivative on the function f, what is the value for? What is the derived value? Right? That is what we are going to look at. Or let me take this again. Sorry. This is the one I'm trying to access. This one, it is not coming up. Yeah. Let's say some common derivatives. Let's say I want to take the partial derivative of x squared. I want to take the partial derivative for the value x squared with respect to x, right? Taking the partial derivative of x squared with respect to x. This is how we interpret it. Take the partial derivative on x squared with respect to x. If you do like this, how what is the result here? So how we need to, there is something called the power rule. Power rule, what it says is, let's say you have n x power n, right? N into x to the power n minus 1. This is what the power rule. X to the power n is equal to n into. If you apply this one here, what will happen? Since you have x here and here also you have x, right? But here you have x squared. If you take the partial derivative of the x squared with respect to x, then you need to apply this one. N into, what is n? The 2 will come before x. And then x to the power 2 minus 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. X to the power 1 is 1 only, x only, right? X to the power 1 is x only, 2x. This is how we compute the derivatives, partial derivatives. Let us use another example for better understanding. Do by, listen, I am going to use y here, minus 2y to the power 5. What is the partial derivative of y in this case? Can you tell me? The partial derivative for the minus 2 into y to the power 5. So apply the power rule. This is what your power rule, right? So 5 will come before this, right? So 2 into 5 minus 10. Negative 10. 2 into 5 is 10 and y to the power 5 minus 1. So minus 10 into y to the power 4. So this is how you need to take the partial derivative, right? So you need to understand this first before we jump into derive the equation for the gradient descent algorithm. And supposing I have something else like this, instead of x and y in the denominator I use do theta. Let's say I have something called 5 minus theta whole square. Rishik, why don't you tell me what is the answer for this and what is the partial derivative for 5 minus theta whole square now? By apply this rule, what will happen? 2 will come here, right? So 2 into 5 minus theta, right? 2 into 5 minus theta. Sorry, here 5 minus theta, right? Yeah, 2 5 minus theta. But in this case, the 5 is the constant because we are taking the partial derivative with respect to theta, right? Holding theta, the rest of the values. Yeah. So 2 into 5 minus theta. Here 2 minus 1, right? Yeah. Into. Tell me. What is your answer? What did you say?
2 into 5 minus theta into minus 1 when we differentiate minus theta.
Yeah, right. So here what will happen is, so we are taking the partial derivative with respect to theta only. the holding only the theta, holding theta, the rest of the values are considered as constant. Holding the theta, the rest of the values are considered as constant. Hence, you need to ignore this one. This one will be ignored. And 2 minus theta, right? So 2 minus theta into minus theta into 1 is minus theta, right? So minus 2 here, minus 2 into theta. That is how we need to take the partial derivative. And to understand this better, we'll use another example. Let's use some other example. Let me do one thing. I think this one is not getting cleaned. Okay, let me clean it up. Okay, so now let us use another thing here, dou by dou y. Let's do some little bit complex thing. Okay, 2 to the power. If I use more than one term, right, more than one variable, 2 y phi and z squared. So what is the derivative, the partial derivative of this one? We are taking the partial derivative of this one using y, right, with respect to y. So holding y, the rest of the values will become constant. Hence it will get dropped. So this is not y, because we are taking y, we are taking the partial derivative of this one using y. Apart from y, the rest of the variables and values will be considered as a constant, hence that one will get dropped. So now we are left with minus 2 into y to the power 5. When you apply the power rule, what will happen? 5 into 2 is 10, y to the power 4, right? So now you understood. So what is partial derivative, how to take the partial derivative, fine? Okay, the next step is next what we will do is we will try to understand something else called the chain rule. We have something else called chain rule. Don't worry about the chain rule and all the things, okay? These are all very simple thing. I'll use some simple examples. Let me just go to my PowerPoint. So this is the chain rule, okay? The chain rule is a formula, calculate the derivative, the composition of functions, okay? For example, you have something like this. Let us look at this example. You have f of x, the value for the f of x 6 plus 3 and g of x equal to minus 2x plus y. Now if you use the chain rule to calculate the h dash of x, where h of x equal to f of g of x. Right, so see in simple term how the chain rule works is, for example, in this case, right, let's say here f of g of x, right, you take the partial derivative first on the outside and then you take the inner thing, take the partial derivative. See, first you take the partial derivative for the outside function and then you need to take the partial derivative for the inner function, okay? So if you take the partial derivative on the outside as per the chain rule, you need to take the partial derivative on the outside, right, f dash. So f dash is nothing but you have taken the derivative on the outside function first, and then when you take the derivative for the inside function as per chain rule, g of x will become g dash of x. F dash of g of x, you have taken the partial derivative on the outside function and then you need to take the derivative for the inside function, f dash of g of x into g dash of x. But what if you take if I take the partial derivative for these two equations separately, f dash of x is, if you take the partial derivative with respect to x, right, except other than x, rest of them are constant, rest of them will be considered constant, and 3 will drop. So here the f dash of x is 6, right? So the x into 6 is 6. This is the partial derivative value for this one. After taking the partial derivative, this is the value for f dash of x, and g dash of x, we are taking the partial with respect to x, right? So the minus 2 into x, the what value is multiplied by x? Minus 2. That is what you need to specify it here. And if you simply plug in here, what will happen? F dash of g of x, my g of minus 2x plus y, and g dash of x is minus 2. If I plug in this one, so I get 6. What is f dash of g of x is nothing but my 6, right? 6 into minus 2, minus 12. Forget about this one. See, f dash of, even if you take the partial derivative on this one, what will happen? F dash of this one is so don't go by this. Ideally, the g of x, right? We already computed f dash of x. F dash of x is, if you simply plug in here, you will get 6 here, and then g dash of x is minus 2, 12. In simple term, how this chain rule works is, you need to take the partial derivative on the outside function first, right? You need to take the partial derivative on the outside function, and then you need to take the partial for the inside function also. That is nothing but your chain rule. And now let us look at the gradient descent derivative. Here I mentioned everything step by step. I don't have to write it in the blackboard. If I write it also, it will be good, right? Yeah, better I will derive it so that you will be able to understand step by step, right? Instead of looking at the PowerPoint, what I will do is I will derive it step by step. Fine, we'll start with the derivation of the cost function, okay? We know the cost function, j of theta is equivalent to 1 by m for each and every observation, right? So I equal to 1 to, for each and every observation, what is the error? H theta of xi, and I use this notation into y. This is my H theta of xi is nothing but predicted, this is my actual value. Okay, so I'm going to take the partial derivative on both the side, dou by dou theta naught. First we'll start taking the partial derivative for the theta naught intercept, okay? J of theta naught comma theta 1. This is my intercept, this is my slope, okay? I'm going to take the partial derivative on both sides, dou by dou theta naught of the entire thing here, okay? I don't want to write it once again. Next step is, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 1 by m. Here 1 by m, sum of I equal to 1 to m, all these things are there, right? The entire equation is there inside of this parenthesis. I take the 1 by m outside. So this is called multiple, this is called scalar multiple rule. As per this scalar multiple rule, I take the 1 by m outside of this one, 1 by m into dou by dou theta naught into here the rest of the thing, h theta of xi, very easier one and very interesting one also, okay, true, right? So far so good. Now what I'm going to do is, now I'm going to use the power rule. If I use power rule, what will happen? The 2 will come, right? The 2 will come before this one, h theta of yeah, here what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the same thing, I equal to 1 to m. Here also the same thing, I somehow missed out here, I equal to 1 to m. So 2 into h theta of xi minus yi into dou by dou theta naught of h theta of xi minus yi. Okay. So in this case, what will happen is, here I'm going to bring this outside, 2 divided by m, and the sum of, for each and every observation, we are going to use the s theta of xi minus yi, and here I'm taking the partial derivative of this one with respect to theta naught, right? So with respect to theta naught. So what will happen is, here what is s theta of xi? S theta of xi is nothing but my linear regression equation, right? S theta of xi or s theta of x is equivalent to, right, is equivalent to theta naught plus theta 1x. If I plug in this one here, what will happen? If I plug in this here, right, instead of s theta of x, I can say theta naught plus theta 1x also, right? Ignore this one now, theta naught plus theta 1x. If I take the partial derivative of theta naught plus theta 1x minus yi with respect to theta naught, what will happen? What is the output here? We are taking the partial derivative with respect to theta naught, right? This is 0, so this is 0. Theta naught and theta. So except theta naught, rest of the values will be considered as a constant. It will be dropped. As simple as that. So theta naught is there. So theta naught is multiplied by 1, right? Theta naught into 1 is 1. So when you take the partial derivative of the theta naught with respect to, theta naught with respect to theta naught, the theta naught along with the theta naught is 1, right? 1 into theta naught is 1. So the entire thing will become 1 here, into 1. So the partial derivative for the theta naught, j of theta, right, for theta naught, right? So this is for j of dou by dou theta naught of j of theta naught comma theta 1. But we have taken the partial derivative with respect to j of theta naught, right? So for theta naught, this is what the equation. I can say something like this, okay? And so 1 by m, right? Instead of saying 2 by m, right, for convenience sake, I'm going to say 1 by m into I equal to 1 to m, sorry, I equal to 1 to m this is 1, okay, I equal to 1 to m. The same thing, h theta of xi minus yi. This is dou by dou theta naught with respect to j by j of theta naught. This is my partial derivative for the theta naught. Similarly, we need to find out the value for the theta 1. Very interesting, okay? Don't get confused, okay? If I take the partial derivative on the theta 1, what will happen? For example, dou by dou theta 1 into j of theta naught comma theta 1. So in this case, theta 1, we are taking the partial derivative of the cost function with respect to theta 1, right? So here what will happen is, on the right side also you will be using dou by dou theta 1 and h theta of xi, right? H theta of xi minus yi, right? And then what will happen is, in this case, what will happen is, you will get xi, right? Xi. Why? If you plug in the value for the, I'll just if I extract this one, theta naught plus theta 1 x and ith value of xi minus the ith value of y, right? So if I, since theta 1, we are taking the partial derivative of this one with respect to theta 1, other than theta 1, the rest of the values are considered as constants, hence that one will get dropped. So this one will get dropped and this one will get dropped. And what is the partial derivative for theta 1, right? For this one is, which value is multiplied by theta 1? Xi, right? Xi. Hence dou by dou theta, the partial derivative for the theta 1 is nothing but your this one, 1 by m is equivalent to I equal to 1 to m into h theta of xi minus yi into xi. This is the one, right? As per the power rule, right? So the 2 will come before this, right? And this one multiplied this one, but again, right? The dou by dou theta naught will remain, right? 2 to the power 1 will be there. So this one into this one. So this when it comes to theta naught, this one will becomes 1, right? But when it comes to theta 1, this one becomes, right, the xi, right? Here we have xi. So this is the partial derivative for theta 1, and partial derivative for theta naught is simply instead of xi minus yi. There is no xi because it became 1, right, in the previous case. And what are the update rules? Now the update rules are nothing but for theta naught colon is equivalent to theta naught, the current position minus the alpha into dou by dou theta naught into j of theta naught comma theta 1. So this is the one gives me the gradient. By multiplying the gradient with the alpha value, you will get the step size. And if you subtract the step size from the current position, you will get the next position. And similarly, theta 1 is nothing but theta 1 minus alpha into dou by dou theta 1 into j of theta naught. For both the parameter, we need to update the values for each and every step, right? Right. So if I write it, if I write a general equation for these two, right? So theta j could be either 0 or 1. Okay, theta j is equivalent to colon. It's an assignment a colon equivalent to theta j minus alpha into dou by dou theta j into j of theta naught comma theta 1. So here for j equal to 0 and j equal to 1. For this is the common equation, right? For these two, this is the common. If I generalize this one, you will get like this. So what we need to do, we need to repeat this. We need to iterate, right? Repeat until convergence. So what do you mean by convergence? So as long as the theta values minimal keep iterated, that is what we are saying here. Okay, but what we do is, right, we keep doing this one, right? So in this case, what we are doing is the theta naught and theta 1. What we do is we'll be right, we are going to keep update this for each and every iteration. Okay, so let's say in this case what will happen, the theta naught and theta 1 is there, right? I'm going to use temp 0 instead of theta 0. I'm going to use something called temp 0 and temp 1 and some variable. Okay, temp 0 and temp 1 instead of theta naught theta 1, here at temp 0 and temp 1 I'll temporarily store it here. And after after this step, what I do is I assign it back to the theta naught theta 1. So here you need to do the simultaneous update. Okay, and theta naught, and here you need to assign temp 0 and here you need to assign temp 1, right? Temp 0 and temp 1. So you need to make sure that we are making this simultaneous update to this one. Okay, so but here the challenge here is choosing the optimal value for alpha is very crucial here. Okay, if you choose the higher alpha value, right, what will happen is it can lead to, look here, this is what the convex function, isn't it? This is what my convex function. You are standing here and your step size, choosing the optimal steps is very crucial here. If you take a longer step, what will happen? If you take a longer step, what will happen? You might tend to overshoot. Actually it is there here, your minimal cost is here, but you are overshooting, right? And if you take very small steps, what will happen? It will take a lot of time to converge it, right? It will take longer time to converge it. So the bigger learning rate leads to overshooting problem, and the smaller learning rate will take longer time, very longer time to converge. Okay, that's pretty much about the gradient descent algorithm. The derivation part is also very simple. I made it very simple here. So here in this case, right, you might be wondering 2 into look here, so the 2 will come here, and instead of x, and here 2 minus 1 is 1. So in y again you are doing this one here, right? This is based on chain rule. Yeah, I should have told that time chain rule. I thought you will be able to understand since I explained. So as per chain rule, first you take the partial derivative on the outside function, right? In this case, right, this is this is the outside function, right? And then you need to take the partial derivative for the inside function. What we are doing is, as per the power rule, we multiplied by this one, and then we have 2 into h of xi minus yi. So since this is the outside function, and when you take the partial derivative in the inside function, dou by dou theta naught of this one, right? That is how, so here we use chain rule. So now you understood what is power rule, what is chain rule, and what is multiple rule. Multiple rule is very simple. We just took, say, look here, 1 by m into sum of I equal to 1 to m, the entire thing here, right? H theta of x and minus yi, and this is the one, right? So this in the 1m which we took it outside, this is nothing but multiple rule. As per the multiple rule, what it does is, this you have something called dou by dou x into alpha u. Dou by dou x into alpha u is equivalent to, the alpha will come outside, alpha into dou by dou x of dou alpha, your alpha came here, dou u by dou x, alpha into alpha will come outside. So this is called your scalar multiple, based on which we took this outside. And the next step, what I did, I applied both the power rule as well as I applied the power rule, 2 into h of xi into this one. And the next step is this one. What is this one? The chain rule. By the combination of both power rule and chain rule, if you apply this here, what will happen? We have to take the partial derivative outside, and you need to take the partial derivative of the inside function. That is the reason why dou by dou theta naught of this one we are taking it. Okay. And next step is, since theta naught, we are taking the partial derivative with respect to theta naught. Since theta naught is here, theta naught is multiplied by 1, right? So this 1 will be considered. But the rest of them are constant, and the rest of them will get dropped. For this, if you take the partial derivative for this thing, right, with theta naught, with respect to theta naught, the value is 1 only. For the entire thing, the value is 1. So 1 multiplied by this one, you will get, instead of 2 divided by m, we will say, the conventionally we use 1 by m. 1 by m into h of xi minus yi. This is for theta naught, the theta naught, partial derivative for the theta naught. Similarly, for the theta 1, if I use theta 1, the same thing, right? So the same thing will come here. But here what will happen is the same thing, 1 by m, I equal to 1 instead of xi minus yi. But here, if you take theta 1 is multiplied by x. The x, the ith value of x, right? The theta naught and yi will get cancelled out. The xi is multiplied by theta 1, hence the partial derivative with respect to theta 1 for this one is xi. So hence you need to multiply this by xi. That is what I did it here. Okay, and finally, apart from the this one partial derivative, you need to see, this is what the elaboration, the dou by dou theta naught, j of theta naught theta 1, which is nothing but we need to plug in this value here. We need to plug in this value there. Okay, 1 by m, that is the one there, and this is nothing but the into xi. Okay, that is the one for that one. Okay, that is the partial derivative for this one. You need to first find out the partial derivative value for the partial derivative. Once you are able to find out the partial derivative, the next step is you can plug in that value here, and then if you multiply this, you will get the position. Simple. You need to know both the direction as well as the step, right? Step size. The direction is given by this one, and the step size is given by this equation, right? For each and every step, what step size that I should use. Can I use 1 feet or half feet or quarter feet? That one will be determined, by keep updating this parameter, we will get to know this one. Hope you understood, right? It's very simple equation, but still, if you are not clear, you can watch my video one more time. And if you are still not clear, you just tell me. Since it being bit complex one, I'll helpline. I will repeat it once again, at least in the next session also. Okay. Next, we will see how to implement the same in Python. Okay. In the case of Python, so look here. I taken a very simple example here, and I'm using something like this one. don't worry about all these things. Okay, I'm using okay, here the dependent variable is price. Okay, the dependent variable is price and size of the house. I'm taking only, the independent variable size of the house, number of bedrooms, all the things. Yeah, here I've taken two variables, theta naught and theta 1. So here what I'm doing is I simply find out the cost function. I define a cost function. Okay, for each and every iteration, right? When I take each and every step, what is the cost? Which means for each and every value for theta naught and theta 1, what is the corresponding cost? Okay, that is what I'm trying to find out here. The hypothesis is nothing but the equation, right? The bias into, here I've taken the dot product. This is and I'm returning this one, right? So 1 by 2m, 1 by 2m, look here, in the equation which we have seen it here, right? 1 by 2m into s theta of x minus y, actual minus predicted, 1 by 2m into this one, right? That is I'm going to return it. So the cost function will give me the cost. The next one is gradient. You remember that equation, right? The equation, if you want, you need to find out the gradient, and you need to multiply with the alpha value, right? Alpha into 1 by m into s theta of x minus y, and you need to, here theta naught, right? Theta naught, but in this case I'm using two independent variable, right? So theta naught is nothing but intercept and slope 1 and slope 2. Two slopes I'm using it. If you, in the interview they'll ask you, because if you look at the internet, most of the article they mention the example for implementing gradient descent, right? They used only a single independent variable. How do I use more than one independent variable? Can you help me by deriving the equation, right? So in Python. So I've created here, I'm just passing x bias y theta iterations. Forget about this one now. And here you just look at simply I convert the equation in Python. That's all. See, this is my current position minus this one will give me my the direction, right? So alpha into this one, the direction, right? So if you subtract this one, my current position, you will get the next position for the theta naught. Similarly for theta 1, theta 2, you will get it, and then you need to update these values simultaneously so that you will get to know the next position. Okay, but if you include this statement for each and every the statement here, right? If you put this one here, what will happen? It will be overwritten, right? So and that is the reason why you need to put these three things simultaneously. You need to update these three, temp 0, temp 1, temp 2. You need to update it simultaneously for each iteration. Okay, so look here, if I show you this one, right, you will get to know this number of how many. See, next question is how many number of iterations that I need to use it. Can I use 1000? Because let's say my alpha value is 0.0001, right? For alpha value 0.0, for 0.001 my theta naught value is something, theta 1, theta 2, and right. So in that case, at how many number of iterations should I use it? If I use lesser alpha value, as I mentioned, it will take longer time to convert. If I use more, so if I take the larger value for the alpha, what will happen? It will converge fast, but the chances are high that it may overshoot. But still, we need to know how many number of iterations are required given the alpha value. See, in this case, I used the alpha value randomly 0.3, and iterations I used randomly 100. You can specify whatever value we wanted. Okay, the iterations and alpha we already mentioned it, and the theta and bias is nothing but your intercept. Okay, and this is your theta value. This is the actual value. Okay, I just passed it, and if you look at here, the number of iterations. Look here, the cost of theta, right? The theta value is getting reduced at the 10th iteration itself, right? So, or let's say even if you take 20, right? 20 iterations are more than sufficient. 20 iterations are more than sufficient, right? How do you determine the result? So what you do is you use you will be using a function. Using the function, you will just plot the iteration versus cost graph. With the help of this, you will be able to find out. In the y-axis, plotting the number of iterations. In the x-axis, by plotting the cost of theta, you will get to know at for which number of iterations, right? So what is how many number of iterations that I should use it in order to get the reduced value for the theta. That is what we are getting it. And also I just printed the theta value. So this is my intercept value and the estimated intercept value. For this estimated intercept and the slope values, my cost is getting reduced. Use these three values for theta naught, theta 1 and theta 2 to get the optimal cost, which means to get the lesser error. Use these value for your theta naught, theta 1, theta 2. And with this one, once you know the intercept and slope value, predicting the price is very simple, right? The target variable, predicting the target, very simple. You know the equation, y is equal to beta naught plus beta 1 x1 plus beta 2 x2. So you know the beta naught and beta 1 into the size of the house plus beta 2 into the bedroom, in this case bedroom, right? If you multiply this, you will get the estimated housing price. In this case, let's say supposing you want to estimate the cost of house with 1650 square feet, right? Here what happens here is, we just pass this, we create an array here, x underscore predict, and here what we are doing is we are subtracting the mean underscore size. Here we are doing some kind of min-max scaling, right? Z-score. You remember Z-score? Using Z-score, we can do normalization. Yesterday we discussed as part of k-means algorithm, right? K-means, even for k-means and hierarchical clustering, we need to do normalization. I discussed about Z-score, x minus x bar divided by sigma. Min-max scaling, I did it, and then what I did, x predict dot product, I'm doing it. So don't worry about the dot product, right? This is the one will give you the predicted value, okay? This is the one will give you the predicted value. Hypothesis is nothing but instead of x, okay? So for this value, x predict 1 and x predict 2, right? 1 and 2, what is the predicted value? That is what we are going to see. X predict 1, x predict 2 is holding the min-max scaling. We did this min-max scaling for both the size and bedroom. For this size and for this bedroom, right? What is the estimated value? Okay. See, I will explain you later point in time how to how to implement a linear regression model using the matrix format. Using the matrix format, how do we implement the linear regression? That part we'll discuss it later. When I explain that, you will be able to understand, what is this dot product is doing it, okay? When you take the dot product, it's nothing but the matrix. I'm using the matrix here, okay? So at this moment, you just think using this. So look here, in the case of gradient descent, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the cost function. Look here, I call this cost function, right? I call this function as part of gradient descent. For each and every iteration, the parameters will get updated. For each and every step, what is the value for the parameter, right? Theta naught, theta 1, theta 2, right? So that is one we observe. What we are doing for each and every iteration, we want to know the cost, so that we get to know for which values of theta naught and theta 1 and theta 2 my cost is very minimal. We will get to know. How do you get to know that? You need to have another function, right? This function will tell you for each and every iteration. With the help of this only we are able to plot this one, right? The gradient descent, though we are calling the gradient descent, it in turn calls the cost function. Using the cost function, we are able to plot the cost in the y-axis. Here, number of iterations. With this, we are able to understand how many number of iterations are required to get the optimal cost. So, with the help of the iteration versus cost graph, we will get to know how well whether it is converging it or not, right? This is the one you will get to know. Anyhow, we will discuss the gradient descent algorithm once again when I cover neural network. In neural network, we have something called forward propagation, backward propagation. As part of backward propagation, linear regression algorithm is used. Okay. Once again, when I cover that one as part of linear neural network, you will be able to understand very clearly. Okay. I hope this session would have helped you to understand the gradient descent algorithm in a very simple manner. But however, I would urge you to watch my video once again, and probably I will share some other article. You just go through it. It's very intuitive one. Okay, if you go through on it along with my video, you will be able to understand very clearly. Okay, I was talking about the types of gradient descent algorithm. One is batch gradient descent. The one I discussed so far was the batch gradient descent algorithm. So look here, the vanilla batch gradient descent, right? What we are doing is we are updating the theta value by multiply. So we are by subtracting the product of both the learning rate and the gradient descent, and subtracting this from your current position, you will get the next position, right? So in this case, look at here. To calculate the gradient of the cost function, we need to sum the cost of each sample. If you have 3 million samples, we have to loop through 3 million times or use the dot product. In the case of batch gradient, let's say you have 3 million records. To compute the cost for each and every parameter, right? You need to, the algorithm will use 3 million observations. It is time consuming process, especially if you have huge volume of data, you are gone. That is one disadvantage with batch gradient descent. We have something else called stochastic gradient descent. You can use stochastic gradient descent. Here what we do, we are using the cost gradient of one example at each iteration instead of using the sum of the gradient, sum of the cost gradient of all examples. For each iteration we are using one observation, only one example we are using it. Remember here we used alpha into sum of I equal to 1 to m and dou by dou theta naught dou theta j into j of theta j, right? So in that case, instead of using I equal to 1 to m each and every observation, what we are taking only one example. But still this is not sufficient, right? If you use only one observation, it is not going to be that much, right? It's so, as we are because it's using only one example, right? Its path to the minimum is noisier. It's very random than that of the batch gradient, right? Instead of using even the stochastic gradient descent also, right? The advantage here is training time is very shorter because we are using only one observation. But we cannot rely on only one observation, right? So what we do is, instead of using both the batch as well as the stochastic gradient descent, we use something else called mini batch gradient descent. It uses the subset of the data, right? It uses n data points at each iteration. N data points is nothing but the subset of the data. Instead of using 3 million records, you just take just the subset of the data, and with that you train your model so that the volume of the data is less, and the estimated value for the parameters will be reliable, more reliable. Instead of using only one observation, right? If you use subset of the data, it will be more helpful. The cost function for the logistic regression is different. Okay, we'll discuss that a later point in time. So as of now, I discussed about the gradient descent algorithm with respect to linear regression model. Okay, very simple one, right? You just watch my video and try to understand it. Any of this script is also available. I will recheck in my latest GitHub folder. If it is not there, I will upload it once again. Okay, and I have some assignments for you all. So in this case, I used two independent variable. If we have more than two independent variable, right? How do you find out this one, right? The estimated value for the parameters, right? For that, I have another assignment. Will give it to you all. Start work on that also. Okay, but don't worry if you don't understand that one. I will walk you through that also. Okay, don't worry, because it's a bit difficult to understand this algorithm. But anyhow, I reduced your learning curve by using this simple analogy, right? Climbing, descending from the hill. Right? That example, you should have understood. Only thing is, you should know the direction and step size. Using that equation, we are all set. Even if you are blindfolded, the person with that equation, he can reach the destination correctly. Fine, we are all set. I covered the gradient descent so far. Next one is, let us take 2 minutes break. I will go and grab some water. We'll continue with the Naive-Bayes. It is very, very small and simple algorithm. Okay, so that you will feel happy since I cover very simple one at the end of this one. Okay, just give me 2 minutes. 10 now my time is 10:30. Yeah, I don't know in US the time, and others will circle back. We resume by 10:33. Okay, give me 2 minutes. Okay, I am back. I guess all of you are there, right? Just to quickly repeat this, look here. This is what I discussed so far. Just to summarize, look here. So what we did in this case, right, when you visually look at this one, we randomly initialize some value for theta naught and theta 1, right? So for example, randomly you are standing here. That means you are initialized with some value for theta naught, theta 1 and theta 2, right? Let's take theta naught, okay? You randomly initialize some value, and with the partial derivative, by taking the partial derivative on the cost function, you are getting the gradient, right? Once you get the gradient, and if you multiply the gradient with your step size, and if you subtract it from the current position, you are currently here, right? You know the current position. If you subtract the product of these two from your current position, you will get to know the next position value, right? Next position value. And similarly, for each and every step, look here, from here to here, right? If you want to move from here to here, currently you are here. by keep changing value for theta naught and theta 1, right? So theta naught, right? Theta naught, and similarly theta 1, here theta naught, and this is similarly for theta 1 and theta 2, right? For theta naught, by keep changing the values, we're trying to find out the optimal value for the cost, right? That is what we are doing it simply. Fine, next one is the Naive-Bayes algorithm. Naive-Bayes is very simple algorithm, okay? It is based on, this algorithm is based on Bayes theorem. A gentleman by the name of Thomas Bayes, he was the one invented this one, okay? He was the one came up with this Bayes theorem during this period, okay? It can be seen as a way of understanding how the probability that a theory is true is affected by a new piece of evidence. It is also a supervised machine learning algorithm. It is mainly used for classification, text classification, and we have a topic called NLP, natural language processing. In the case of natural language processing, it is very much helpful, this algorithm, to perform the text classification, performing the sentiment analysis, spam classification, classifying the articles, right? That kind of instance, the Naive-Bayes algorithm is very much helpful, okay? It is a probability based classifier, and it is based on Bayes theorem. It's classified based on Bayes theorem with independence assumption between predictors. This you need to remember. It makes an independence assumption between the predictors, okay? Now let us directly jump into this equation. This is the equation for Naive-Bayes, okay? Probability of A, this line is nothing but given that. The probability of A given that B, which means what is the probability of A given that B has already occurred? Given that B has already occurred. That is what this one says, this one, okay? This is called posterior. We need to find out the posterior probability. And on the right side of the equation, probability of the opposite of this, and probability of B given A into probability of A divided by probability of B. The denominator we call as a predictor prior probability. In the numerator, this is called likelihood, this is called class prior probability, okay? In simple term, we call the posterior into likelihood into prior divided by evidence. This is how in simple we call this one, okay? But anyhow, don't worry about this equation. I don't want to scare you with this equation. We'll directly jump into one example so that you'll be able to understand very clearly in a simple and intuitive manner. I'll just okay, something went wrong with my image. Let me just store it here. Okay, I removed this one from there. 1 second, let me just give me a second, okay? Give me a second. I'll just Okay, no problem. I'll use it from my website. I think it got corrupted, that PowerPoint. Some images, I attached some images, it got corrupted. Anyhow, it is there in my website. Look here. In this case, let us use this example, okay? Look at this data set. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 features are there. This is my labeled output variable, play tennis. This is my target variable. Listen very carefully, okay? In this target categorical variable, how many number of classes are there? Only 2 classes, no and yes, right? Beyond that, we don't see anything else. We have only 2 classes are there, yes, no. We don't see any other class. Hence, I call this a binary categorical variable. This is my dependent variable. This is what I want to predict it based on these independent features. This is the historical data. In the past, a gentleman called, a boy called, John. John played tennis given this weather condition. So the outlook is, sunny. When the outlook was sunny and when the temperature was hot and when the humidity was high and there was no wind, right? He did not play because of the high temperature and high humidity. He did not play. This we recorded based on the past historical data, okay? And here overcast. What is overcast? Cloudy. It is cloudy. The temperature is hot and humidity is high, but still it is cloudy and the wind is false. In that situation, he played tennis with the different combination of the weather condition. Here we recorded how many number of times he played yes, how many number of times he did not play tennis. Now look at this column. Tell me how many number of times he played tennis. Yes, how many yeses are there here? How many number of records are there? Totally 14 records are there, right? 14 records are there. Out of 14 instances, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Only 9 instances he played tennis out of 14 times, right? 9 out of 14. This is probability of played tennis. Probability of not playing tennis is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 out of 14. This is called prior probability. This is called prior probability. Okay, just keep that in mind. This is your prior probability. The next one is, there are 3 steps. Next one is you need to, I don't want to explain that one also. Directly we'll jump in here. Okay, let's take this column outlook. Let's look at this column now. In this column, how many number of classes are there? How many categories are there? How many unique categories are there? Krishik, why don't you tell me? How many unique categories are there here? Krishik, are you there? How many unique categories in Outlook column? How many distinct or unique categories are there? Sunny, right? Rainy, and overcast. Only these 3 are there, right? Beyond this, we don't see anything. Look at here. Now look at here. Sunny, see in the Outlook column, we found only 3 unique categories. Sunny, overcast. And when the Outlook was sunny, how many number of times he played yes? How many number of times he did not play tennis? Three times he played tennis. Now go back to the data here. Is sunny, take sunny, filter only sunny, right? Sunny 1 no, and sunny 2 yes, and sunny 3 yes, 2 no, 2 yes in sunny, right? In sunny 2 no and 3 yes. In total 5 records were there in sunny. Out of sunny, we need to compare each column with the target column. The target column is yes or no, right? Play tennis or not. Look here. This column you need to compare with this one. Similarly, you need to compare this one with this one. Okay. The same thing we are going, same example I am going to use it for decision tree. Okay. Look here. In the Outlook, 3 distinct categories are there, and each category, how many number of records are there? Right. So here 5, and here 4 is there. Overcast and rainy 5 records are there. Out of 5 records, 3 times, right? Out of 9, 3 times he played tennis or golf during sunny time, and 2 times, right? Out of this, see, this is the prior probability, right? 9 is the prior probability, 5 is the prior probability. Remember, this is what? The 9 and 5, okay, prior probability. Out of 9 times he played golf, how many number of times he played during sunny? Right? Out of 9 instances when he played golf, in the case of overcast, how many times he played golf? That is what it is. Outlook, right? So what I do is I divide this one by this one. I get the probability 0.33, and 2 divided by 5 you'll get some probability. And if you add these two things, right? 3 plus 2 is 5, 5 divided by 9 plus 5 is 14, 0.36. If you do row total and column total, right, you will get probability everything. So now your table is ready, the likelihood table. Likelihood table is nothing but your probability table. Now with this, with the help of this one, you can answer any type of question. Suppose your manager is asking you or somebody is asking you, what are the chances John will play tennis when the outlook is sunny, given that outlook is sunny? So when you simply plug in this to the equation, probability of sunny given that yes into probability of yes divided by probability of sunny. So probability of sunny given that yes is, we know, 0.33, and probability of yes is how much? 0.64. Probability of yes is total thing, right? Regardless of the category of the outlook, probability of it, out of the total 0.64, right? Probability of yes is 64. So probability of sunny given that yes is 0.33 into probability of yes is, already we got this one, divided by probability of sunny is 0.36. Probability of sunny is this row, okay, 0.36, and this row is for probability of us, and probability of sunny is this one, okay, because this row is talking about sunny, right? Don't confuse with this one, okay. This is the one. So simply, once you construct this likelihood table, you can find out the probability for different combination of weather, with the different combination of weather condition, whether you play tennis or not, right? And you can also find out play tennis equal to no given that sunny. So for that also you can just simply you can plug in the value, you will get it. Very simple, the Naive-Bayes algorithm, okay? The one problem with Naive-Bayes algorithm, right? Why Naive-Bayes algorithm is called naive? Because it considers each and every column as column is independent of one another. Each and every column is independent of one another. Supposing take this example, right? Fruit example. I'll just use this. 1 second. I'll just. Look here. Let's see shape of the fruit and taste and color. Let's say each fruit has these three properties. Let's apple. I call this apple. Apple is round shape, and taste is let's sweet, and color is red, and let's orange. Orange is also round and sweet, but it is yellow, right? So in this case, Naive-Bayes algorithm, what it does is, right, what assumption it makes is each and every column is independent. It doesn't have any relationship. But if you look at other algorithms, right, the combination of these three only, see the combination of these three properties only, we call this an apple or orange, right? That is how we will distinguish each fruit. Based on the combination of these three only, we will decide what fruit is that. But if the Naive-Bayes consider each and everything as independent, right? Each and every column is independent of other. So how will it can find out this one, right? So in that case, that is the reason why Naive-Bayes algorithm is considered as a naive, because it is considering each and every column or features as independent of the other, right? So we call this a naive, and hence you need to be very cautious when you are supposed to use Naive-Bayes algorithm. So when you use the text-related data, it is very much helpful, right? In the case of text data, it is unstructured data, right? It is not a column-based data; it is unstructured data. In that case, if the Naive-Bayes algorithm, if that considers each and every column as independent, then it makes sense. But whereas in the case of structured data, it is not helpful. If you cannot use Naive-Bayes algorithm, okay, it is not much helpful. Even if you use it on the structured data, it will assign one probability for this, it will assign another probability, it is assigned for the other probability for this one. It is kind of a double counting, okay. It has for the single fruit, it assigns multiple probability, right? So hence it is not good enough to use this algorithm, okay. And also another problem with the Naive-Bayes algorithm is, supposing you get the negative zero value. Look here, in this case, look here, this is often known as zero frequency. So what happens if a categorical variable has a category which was not observed in training, then the model will assign a zero probability. If you get zero probability, right, it will not be able to make a prediction. This is known as zero frequency. To solve this, we can use the smoothing technique. How we do this? We use something like Laplace estimation, which is nothing but wherever the zero value assigned, zero probability assigned, you need to add that with 1. Okay. So that is one disadvantage with Naive-Bayes. Okay. On the other side, Naive-Bayes is also known as bad estimator. So the probability outputs from probability will not be taken too seriously, because it is doing double counting, triple counting, right, on the probability, hence it is not taken seriously. Another limitation of Naive-Bayes is the assumption of independent predictor. That is what I discussed. In real life, it is almost impossible that we get a set of predictors which are completely independent, right? So in that case also, it is not much helpful. But the advantage is it is easy and fast to predict class of a test data set. It also performs well in multi-class prediction. When assumption of independence holds, a Naive-Bayes classifier perform better to other models like logistic regression, and you need less training data. It performs well in case of categorical input variables compared to numerical variables. For numerical, normal distribution is assumed. Okay, but Naive-Bayes is meant for classification purpose only. Okay, we can use Naive-Bayes algorithm only for classification problem, not for the regression problem. But it is good if the data set, whatever you have it, right, if it is unstructured data, especially text data set, right, since it makes the independence assumption better, you can use it that kind of text classification also, but don't use it for the structured data. Okay, that's why you need to understand the pattern of your or structure of your data when you explore the data. As part of data exploration, you need to check that one also. Okay, so what is the structure of the data, whether logically also we can compare, right? For example, in the case of a loan data set, whom we can give loan, whom we need not to give loan, by comparing that the age, income, and pre-existing loan, it's all combination of the thing, right? The structure of the data is depending on one another, the attributes are depending on one another, hence we cannot use Naive-Bayes. Even if you use it, it is not much helpful. In the case of recommendation system, right, to filter unseen information, predict whether you user would like a given resource or not, right? Recommendation system also real-time prediction. Naive-Bayes is eager learning classifier. It is super fast, thus it could be used for making in real time. If you want to make any real-time prediction, you can go for Naive-Bayes, but still you need to explore the structure of your data based on which you can decide. So in the case of multi-class prediction, text classification, sentiment analysis, for the in general, right, for unstructured data, you can use Naive-Bayes algorithm. Naive-Bayes algorithm is very simple to implement it in Python. I'll just take 5 minutes of time, and then after giving this one, we'll wrap up the session. Don't worry. Okay. With this churn analysis, this is my churn analysis. In the churn analysis, if you do Control F and find out naive Bayes, it's very simple. First, you need to initialize the naive Bayes model, and then you need to train the model with both the independent and dependent. Look here. I'll just show you quickly here. Naive Bayes. Look here. sklearn as naive Bayes. You need to import Gaussian naive. So naive Bayes also called a Gaussian naive Bayes because they are Gaussian NB, and you need to initialize the model. The first step is you need to initialize the model. The next step is you need to train your model using the dependent variable and the independent variable. That's it. And then predict. But same as this one. But in this case, my precision and recall, look here, the recall and precision is good in this case. And the accuracy is 0.87. Yeah, the F1 score is 0.87. I'm getting it. Oh, okay. So yeah, the accuracy is 0.86, but whereas the recall and precision is good in this case. Let me just go back to my logistic regression. This is the one I executed long back. Yeah, maybe I would have done this one, data imbalancing. Okay, after I did the balancing, the imbalanced data, right? After I balance this one, I think that is the one. Anyhow, I'll upload this one. This is the latest script. I'll upload this in GitHub. You download this without file and execute each and every line. And also the data set is available already. And if you download the data set, and all you need to just make only one change to this script. What you need to do is you need to specify the path name here. I use this folder right to have this file, so you can, whichever folder you use it right to store this file, right, you need to specify the location of this file. Okay, you just change it and then execute it, it will work. All the packages you don't have to, all these libraries or packages already installed as part of Anaconda, you don't have to reinstall it. Everything will work fine, but only thing is the imbalance, right? Imbalance, you need to install it. I will include that one also. Okay, how to pip install imbalance. Pip install imbalance. Now it's I'll make change so that I'll put it here itself. Okay, what I'll do is I will just, you need to use the exclamatory symbol. Okay, I need to use this one. Pip install imbalance. That's it. You don't have to do anything. It will take some time to install. If you expand this one, you can see how it got installed. So I already installed scikit-learn 0.22. This is the latest version. Okay, you try to install this one. With this one only, the imbalance is working. It took longer time for me to understand this one. Okay, scikit-learn double equals 1 is equal to 0.22. You need to see scikit-learn, sklearn is available, but the version, if you check the version, right, the version is older version. You need to upgrade it to this one using this command. Okay, after I did installation, right, I could see 0.2322. It is good, higher version. With this only the imbalance package is working. If you use the default sklearn, right, which got pre-installed when you installed the Anaconda, right, when you install imbalance, it will not work. It will get installed, but when you try to import, it will throw an error. Keep that in mind. Okay, that's it. So far I covered linear regression, logistic regression, gradient descent algorithm, k-means clustering, hierarchical clustering, and what is that, k nearest neighbor, and today naive Bayes also, right? Many algorithms we covered. So most of them are very simple. You can start practicing it. That's it. I will send you the assignments in the meanwhile for the regression problem, right? I have some data set, housing price related data set. I'll send you that. We start work on it. Okay, work on the assignment so that you can solidify so far whatever I covered. But even if you don't know the answer, don't worry, I will enable access to the solution folder also later, but give it a try. Any questions so far? All right, it is it's already 11 here. Fine. So since you don't have any questions, I would urge you all to watch my video. I will upload this video in the playlist. Okay, for your batch, right? I create a separate full the playlist. There I will upload this video, and the script also I'll upload it without file. Okay, with the data set, everything. Okay, fine. Start practicing.
Thank you, Satya.
Yeah, Swati. Bye.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank
Okay.
you, sir.
Okay. Bye.